My dear masters, we will be beginning our wisdom sharing session for today. So this wisdom sharing session is being done on 2 platforms, on the Zoom as well as on Facebook. So I request people on Zoom to keep your microphones on mute all the time. That will minimize the disruption. So, just give me a few seconds and we will start today's wisdom sharing session. So my dear masters, today's wisdom sharing session is from ego to bliss. I did this session last week on one of the Telugu platforms and it was called Aham Ninchi Param Varaku. And this particular session went so well that there were many requests asking me to do this session in English. So, on the request of my dear masters and friends, I had decided to do this session this weekend. So if I cannot finish this topic today, I will continue it tomorrow as well. So ego to bliss, that's the topic we are talking today. There are 2 terms here that I'm using, masters. One is ego and the other one is bliss. Before we go into this topic a little more, let's understand these 2 terms that I have used in this topic, ego and bliss. What is bliss? Bliss is an expanded version of happiness, my dear friends, because we have to start somewhere to explain bliss. There are no words to explain bliss, my dear masters. So when you have to explain something which is beyond words, beyond dictionary, you have to take help of something that you can understand through words and then try to extrapolate it to explain what the other word means. So, as I have mentioned earlier, in Vedantas, in Veda scriptures, when they start to explain Brahma Tattva, that what is Brahman in Veda, when they try to explain, words cannot do justice. There are no words that can explain what is Brahma Tattva, because the nature of Brahman is beyond words. So how do they explain Brahman in Upanishads and in Vedantas? They use the process of elimination, that Brahman is not this, is not that. So by elimination process, they are trying to tell something that is by saying that it is not this. That is one way of explaining things that are beyond words, which Vedanta has taken that approach. There is also the second approach that Vedanta has taken, is try to show something that you can relate to, that your mind can understand, and from there you can talk about something bigger. So for Brahma Tattva again, they have taken the Panchabhutas, the 5 elements, and as you know, my dear friends, the 5 elements, they get subtler and subtler and subtler. So we all know the earth element, the least subtler element or the dense material. And then after that, you have got the water. So the more subtler is getting, The more vibrations are increasing, that means the energy is more. Then from there, the next one you have got your Agni, your fire element, your wind element, your ether element, which you call the sky or Akasha. So by the time your understanding goes to Akasha, you cannot really comprehend. That's like your limit. And something beyond that is called Brahma Tattva, isn't it, masters? People who have read Vedanta or Upanishads, they can understand or relate to what I'm saying. The same approach let's take for bliss. In Sanskrit, bliss terminology is called as Brahmananda. When you cannot explain Brahma in words, how can you explain Brahmananda in words? Brahmananda is a combination of two words. One is Brahman and the second one is Ananda. So, Paramananda, Brahmananda is the ultimate of happiness. Ultimate. So let's try to understand what is the lower version of it. I wouldn't say lower, but the easier version of it, which is happiness, Santosha. And Santosha, my dear masters, we all can understand Santosha, isn't it? So, because there are many times, you know, you get first class or you first rank, you're happy. That happiness we all understand, isn't it? The happiness that is achieved through something, through achievement of something, that happiness we understand, isn't it? But when that achievement is lost, that happiness goes away as well. We'll talk about it later. But for today's discussion, let's start with happiness that we, in material terms, we human beings understand. So if you understand happiness, my dear masters, remember that this bliss that we are talking about is an expanded version of this happiness. So that was the bliss. Now, if I want to explain the second word, which I have got here, is called ego. Now, we all know what ego is, because it's not quite difficult to understand what ego is, my dear masters. Because number one, it is a term that we all human beings understand very well in the current times. Also, people who have been on my platform, we have done workshops and workshops on ego. For those who have not watched my workshop, or if you want to know more, feel free to visit my YouTube channel, which is called Saroja's Self-Empowerment Workshop. And in that you have Ego Mind Workshop, you have Awareness Workshop, which talks about ego quite a lot. So we have done almost 6 to 7 workshops in that series. So for people who haven't had a chance to attend my workshop, this is what it is. But for today's sake, we will characterize ego as 3 things. What are the characteristics of ego? We all know what ego is, because it is not that difficult as bliss. Ego is something that we all know. So today's topic, that's what we are taking. Something that we all know and we live in, that is ego. And from that, how do we travel to bliss, which is the ultimate state of happiness? That's the topic today. So in that effort, I'm trying to give you what the characteristics of ego are. There are 3 main characteristics of ego. Number 1, sense of self in every thought, in every emotion, and in every reaction. So you see yourself in your thoughts, in your emotion or reaction. That means your whole world is full of I, mine, myself, mine, more than, better. These are the kind of terminologies that normally people use who are in the grip of ego. That is characteristic number 1. Number 2, unconscious nature. People who are in the grip of ego, they do not know that they are in the grip of ego. That's why it's called unconscious nature. Number 3, everything will be conditioned by the past. That means whatever you do, you will be thinking, last time I did that and I already know it. Anything that comes in the present, you will not look at it with non-judgmentality. everything will be judged by the conditioning of your past. So, my dear masters, these are the 3 characteristics of ego. Now, one thing is very clear, that ego is all to do with mind. As long as you're completely unaware of this, if you do not know that this is all the game of ego, that game of mind that is happening, you think that whatever thinking is happening in your mind is who you are. And that is what is ego mind. In ego mind, there are 2 people here, and those 2 people are thought to be one. What are those 2 people? I and myself. So there is one that is constantly thinking or talking. There is a chatter in your mind all the time going on. That is the thinker. And there is an observer who is silently observing the thinker. People who are in the grip of the ego, they think this observer and thinker is one. The day you realize that this observer is different to the thinker will vanish, and that will be the end of the ego mind. That's how the ego works, my dear masters. So, unhappiness is an ego-created mental, emotional disease that has reached epidemic proportions. It is an inner equivalent of environmental pollution of our planet. So what am I saying, my dear masters, here? What I'm saying is, because of the ego that we are trapped in, unhappiness is created by that ego, and that has reached such enormous proportion. This particular unhappiness disease has become such a great epidemic in every human being that it's consuming our lives. Many of us are not even able to get out of the grip. It is that bad, my dear masters. So, and that was one of the reasons we had to do separate workshops for ego mind and how to get out of it. But today's discussion is not about ego mind just alone. It is about, if you understand what is ego, and if you also understand that there's something called bliss, which is the highest version of happiness, then there is a journey from ego to bliss. And let's talk about that journey, isn't it? And in that effort, we are trying to understand these 2 states. So for example, if someone has to go from New York to LA, they need to understand, okay, where is the airport, or how does New York look like, how is the airport? And then you also need to understand that where is the airport in LA, and then once you know what is LA, you need to know the goal, the destination, and then you need to understand how to travel from New York to LA. So you have to understand, can you travel by train? Can you go by road? Can you fly? So that decision needs to be made. Then that alone is not enough. You need to make sure, do you have enough resources to do the travel? And one of the resources these days for travel is money. So do you have adequate money to do the travel? So that's quite important, my dear masters. So what basically we are saying is, whenever we say A to B, we need to understand A, we need to understand B, we need to understand how do we go from A to B? Are we fully equipped or not? So in today's discussion, we have a A, which is ego. We also have a B, which is bliss. And now we are talking from traveling from A to B. So in this process, when we are trying to understand the A, which is ego, it has 4 important traits: complaining and resentment. People who are trapped in ego always complain. Ego can be clever, but it's not intelligent. What is the difference between clever and intelligent? Cleverness is selfishness. You only want to be happy by any means, but you will not take into consideration the around, the environment around you, the people around you. Whereas intelligence will, with intelligence, you alone will not only benefit, but people around you also will benefit. But ego is clever, not intelligent. Also, ego creates separation. And my dear masters, we all know separation creates suffering. And last but not the least, the trait of ego is a person who is in the grip of ego will look upon suffering as the only appropriate response in any given situation. So the person who is suffering from ego, even though you go and tell him that you're suffering, why don't you come out of it? His justification is, this is the only way for me to survive in this given situation. So what does that mean? The person who is in ego will rather suffer than come out of it, because it's a game mind. The game mind, the ego wants you to be trapped in that mind all the time. So there is no coming out as long as you're trapped. Where there is ego, where there are all these traits that I'm talking about, my dear masters, is there bliss? Now I told you what bliss was. Bliss is the ultimate state of happiness. You know what happiness is, which we talked about. So when we talked about the little happinesses and we said bliss is the ultimate, so you can understand if ego is suffering, then definitely where there is suffering, you can't see bliss. So where there is ego, is there bliss? The answer is no, there is not. With ego, you may have self-centered, short-lived happiness. I said self-centered because we said ego may be clever, because ego creates separation. So there may be self-centered, short-lived happiness, but certainly not bliss, my dear masters. You won't see that with ego. These short-lived happiness, they are the finite joys. They're not infinite. They are time-bound. And also, what are they bound from? They are bound, these little joys that I'm talking, the short-lived happiness, they come from pleasure of body. So they're bodily pleasures, mind pleasures. And these body and mind pleasures, what are they dependent on? They are dependent on conditions, outcomes, people, environment. These are the things. So when you take the conditions away, these joys vanish. And hence we are talking, they are finite, not infinite. If they were infinite, then they do not have to depend on conditions. Isn't it, my dear masters? So to give example, body pleasures. If I sit in a nice bubble bath, my body feels good. Or if I eat nice sweets, the taste bud is really happy. So these are body pleasures. Now let's talk about some mind pleasures, my dear friends. If someone says, appreciates us, applauds at what we are doing, that gives us a sense of pride, and that's mind pleasure, isn't it? They're all dependent on somebody. Somebody has to do something, or the environment around us has to do something, isn't it? So these are short-lived happiness, and they are quite finite joys. They're coming from pleasures of mind and body. So this is what happiness, the kind of happiness we are aware of, are these happiness, the short-lived happinesses. Whereas the bliss that I'm talking about in this topic, it has no beginning. It has no end. It ever expands. It's expanding and expanding forever into the infinite emptiness. Like how this universe is expanding, the bliss along with it is expanding. And if it has no beginning and no end, what does that mean? It means it has always been there. It has always been there. What is there? Somewhere. We'll talk about it. So we're trying to get used to these terms. What are they? How they look like? Where can we get them? And then we can talk about the journey. So we have given a bit of introduction of ego and bliss. And now the question is, we are talking from ego to bliss. Is it a long journey from ego to bliss? If it is, because it looks like, they look like chalk and cheese. They look like two extremes of a spectrum. One spectrum, one end of the spectrum is ego, and the other end of the spectrum is bliss. So they are like chalk and cheese. If that is the case, then how do we travel? No, friends. They are not far at all. In fact, they are next to each other all the time. All the time. If that is the case, if they are next to each other all the time, then where are they? They are around our third chakra, my dear masters. Unlike the little short-lived pleasures of mind and body, which are arising from the lower two chakras, I'm going to go through detail. I'm going to talk about chakras for people who do not know. This bliss that I'm talking about, which has no beginning and no end, and is expanding forever into the formless, infinite emptiness. This is coming from the third chakra, my dear masters. And this particular bliss, it opens the door to who you are. And the window to this joy opens up when one surrenders one's ego around the third chakra. So, my dear masters, if you're wondering, what are chakras? Chakras are energy portals between our pranic body and our physical body. So what is pranic body? What is physical body? People who really want to know all types of bodies, I'm going to give a brief introduction today. Before we start going into chakras, when I'm saying it's energy portal between our pranic body and our physical body, then we need to understand that our body that we are looking with naked eye, what are we looking? This physical body is a small part of who you really are. So all you can see as yourself is this physical body. But that's not alone, my dear masters. There are more bodies of yours that you are not able to see through this naked eye. So quickly, if I can review, because the topic is not about our bodies today, I will quickly go through the body that you're able to see with your naked eye, which is the physical body. In Sanskrit is called Annamaya Kosha, which is your physical body in English that you can see, which survives on food and water that we feed. So that is the physical body, the outer sheath that you're seeing. As you travel further, there is another body which is supporting your physical body. So this body that you are able to see with your naked eye is called Annamaya Kosha, the physical body. But the body that supports this physical body is called pranic body. In Sanskrit, it's called Pranamaya Kosha. So my dear masters, if I can explain, you have got your physical body on the outset that you can see in 3 dimensions, which is being supported by your pranic body or Pranamaya Kosha. So I've talked about 2 bodies. Now, there is the third body behind your pranic body, Pranamaya Kosha, and that is called Manomaya Kosha. So this Manomaya Kosha we'll come to that. So first, let's talk about the bodies quickly. I'm not going into too much details about these bodies, but just let me make you understand so that you understand what we are talking about in this topic. Behind the Manomaya Kosha is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and behind the Vijnanamaya Kosha is your Anandamaya Kosha. Okay, so for your body, if you understand these 5, it's pretty good. After that, the supracausal bodies and all, you don't need to understand. It's more on the universal consciousness. But at this stage, the 5 bodies that you need to understand is the physical body, the pranamaya kosha, supported by the pranic body, the physical body, the annamaya kosha, supported by the pranic body, pranamaya kosha, which in turn is supported by the manomaya kosha, the mental body. So this pranic body is that body that takes the cosmic energy in and supports the physical body. So you're understanding, my dear masters, your physical body is only surviving because of this pranic body. How? This is a totally big subject, and I have done this workshop about, these are called sheets of bodies, body sheets. I've done workshops on this. Anyone who is interested in details can again visit my YouTube channel, Saroja's Self-Empowerment Workshops. And these workshops I've done in 3 languages, Hindi, English, and Telugu. In English, it's called Holistic Living Workshop. In Telugu, it's called Sampurnanga Jeevinchta Mela. So go into my YouTube channel and look for this. And there are pictures and it goes through a lot of details. That's the 3 hours workshop. We don't have time to do that here. But just understand that your physical body is only able to survive because of pranic body. Why? Because this pranic body has got 772,000 Nadi Mandala. Nadis means it is like tubes. It's like circuit. Do you know electric circuitry, how it goes? Like that, this pranic body has got 72,000 channels. And it receives cosmic energy from the cosmos and passes through all the 72,000 channels in this, which is called Nadi Mandala Vyavastha, which is supporting each and every organ in your physical body. So, for example, if there is your liver is being supported by maybe 10,000 nadis. And even if one nadi gets blocked, your liver will not stop working, but will start misfunctioning or malfunctioning. There'll be some issues. So any diseases that appear in your physical body is because of blockage in your pranic body. It's so important to understand. If the cosmic energy is not flowing through your Nadi Mandala Vyavastha in your pranic body freely. So again, what does it mean freely? You know pipes, water pipes or tubes. When water starts flowing in the water pipes, if there is block in, what will happen? The water won't flow. Similarly, the 72,000 energy tubes that are there in this pranic body needs to be nice and clean for the cosmic energy to flow freely, because each physical organ in our body is being supported by multiple nadis. Nadis means they are like energy tubes, multiple nadis in your energy portal, in your pranic body. So any disease that you are seeing, even if you have headache or even if your eye has got a problem, anything, that means the corresponding energy tube has got a problem. Hence, in meditation, what we are doing, we are trying to take cosmic energy through this pranic body and making sure that we flush all the blocks out in our energy tubes in pranic body. My dear masters, you know, I didn't want to go through the detail, but I know there are new people to these topics on this platform, so I was not able to ignore it. I'm trying to tell as quickly as I can without going through details, but very important to understand the pranic body and the 72,000 energy tubes that needs to be clear. And in meditation, what is happening is, if this is your pranic body, from your crown chakra, you're taking all the cosmic energy and you're trying to flush all the 72,000 energy tubes, so that once they are clear, automatically your physical body will start functioning well. That is why many people, they do meditation and they cure their illness. How? This is how they do it. They don't know which particular energy tube has been blocked. They don't need to know, because they know that when they do meditation, they will take the cosmic energy and that will clear their Nadi Mandal Vyavastha. It's called Nadi Mandal Vyavastha in Sanskrit, or energy tube systems in English. Okay, so that's the physical body. This is the pranic body. And then, so now you understand how this pranic body works. Third body, which I was talking about, is the mental body, Manomaya Kosha. This particular kosha, this particular sheath has to do with all our thoughts and emotions. This is that particular level. So anything that you're thinking, even the ego, the mind, is all happening at this third level, which is your Manomaya Kosha, mental level. Okay, your thoughts, your emotions, your desires, your ego, everything happens at Manomaya Kosha level. So you understand these three. We're going very quickly through because this is not the topic again. And then the fourth one, as I mentioned, is Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is your intellect. This intellect is dormant in all the animals and all that. It's only active, or we can make it active in human, because we have that discretion to make it active. But if we want to live like an animal, then yes, we don't have to use this Vijnanamaya Kosha. Yeah. And the last one for this discussion is Anandamaya Kosha, which is your bliss body. This is where the bliss that I was talking about, you feel. The first level of bliss, this is where you feel in the bliss body, the Anandamaya Kosha. So, my dear friends, I had to tell you these layers, because what I'm going to show you is, because today the discussion we are talking about, that how do you travel from ego to bliss. And I did mention just a second ago that if it is not too far to travel, why it's not too far to travel? Because I said they are next to each other all the time. And I also mentioned where, around our third chakra. And hence, for people who had to understand about chakras, I started mentioning that chakras are energy portals between our pranic body and physical body. So, my dear masters, I am going to share what does the chakras look like, so that you can understand what it is, because now we are going to talk about these energy portals, because today's discussion is very important for us to understand the third chakra, the first, second and third chakra. So just give me 1 second.